We started this water quality monitoring program. And it's expanded tremendously. We have great partners like Rock Creek Conservancy. Um, but we felt like while it was really important to continue to get out there and have our volunteers collect at the same location each and every week and report that data out to let people know when it's safe to use the river, we had this tier 3 certified lab. And we felt like, are we actually using this lab to to our capabilities? And Carl started going out and just doing some sampling outside of our traditional weekly sampling areas to see how we could use this lab more effectively to respond to things like sewage spills and broken sewage pipes and things like that. So that's kind of the genesis of rapid response and why we feel it's important, because we're not just sitting there on the banks of the river, like letting people know like, hey, bacteria levels are high, but we're actually going and tracking down sources of pollution and working to eliminate those sources of pollution, which is the mission of this organization, what I've been doing for 20 years as a riverkeeper. But I need help, and we have a lot of great volunteers that are out, and I can't be everywhere. The more eyes that we have out in the community, and particularly if they're properly trained on what to look for and how to report this stuff properly, it really, really helps us as an organization, but also really helps to improve water quality. We're trying to give you the tools to help fix and start to eliminate sources of pollution. And partners like you, we feel are just excellent because, again, I cover from Harper's Ferry all the way down to the Chesapeake Bay. So I really depend on our volunteers and people that are out in the field and in their communities to help me understand better about what's going on out there. And some of these things are smaller in scale in terms of just simple reporting, and we're going to talk about that. But just having trained volunteers out there that are actually looking for some of these problems and trying to fix them can go a long way in terms of improving water quality and addressing a lot of the concerns that we have. So I'm going to leave it at that. You're going to hear a lot more about this. I'm going to turn this over to Carl.
Great, thanks, Dean. As Dean mentioned, the objective of what we're trying to do today is kind of give you an overview for what we're trying to accomplish with the RRT. But again, the goal here is to familiarize you with some of our RRT procedures and preparations, what we're looking for when we've been given a tip of an incident that's occurred. We've got an expectation that most or all of you have taken the first 3 modules of the standard water quality monitoring training that we've done. This is not going to be a basic intro review. We're going to assume that you've got some background knowledge in how we're collecting and have probably done it yourself before. But at the end of the day, we want to equip you with the knowledge for how to go out and, as Dean said, help us stand up the RRT specifically in your areas of responsibility, and know how it kind of folds into our larger process of incident analysis and report.
So the first one, is really these the SSO, sanitary sewer system, the combined sewer systems. Both Rock Creek has both of these, and then broken sewer pipes. Broken sewer pipes, both SSOs and CSOs have their own permitting system. And then the broken sewer pipes can be tied to either one of these. But the bottom line is they're all linked to some type of permitting and some type of requirements. And none of it should be, overflowing or into the waterways, even though it happens all the time. So, the SSOs, these are tied to a sewage treatment system that does not collect stormwater, right? It might collect stormwater through inflow and infiltration, as we covered in the early trainings, but it really shouldn't. Combined sewer systems actually allow for stormwater to go into that system, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But the way that a lot of these overflows tend to happen, whether it's a CSO or a SSO, is from blockages or line breaks. Sometimes a lot of fat. There's a whole FOG program, fats, oils, and greases that end up in these lines and then cause backup root systems. So it really doesn't matter what. I just want you to understand why a lot of times this might be happening. A lot of times they'll upgrade the sewage plant but then the collection system to the sewage treatment system is woefully out of date and takes a much longer time to get fixed and up to speed. We're seeing that with our combined sewer system in DC. We see that frequently with sewage treatment plants in other parts of the watershed where the sewage treatment system's been upgraded, but the collection system continues to have. And then when you add a bunch of new development to it, it overwhelms the collection system, and we have these CSOs or SSOs. So according to EPA, there's about 75,000 of these SSO systems every year that occur. These are point source discharges, and again, this is a permitting requirement, and I say that because that means that they're legally required to address it. They're legally required to keep this stuff out of our waterways. They're legally required to maintain their systems, like clearing lines and root systems and stuff. So this is why you reporting out there. And as Carl mentioned, one of the issues I'm dealing with right now is down in St. Mary's County, where the system, the sewage treatment system, seems to have no compliance history issues, but there's a lot of sanitary sewer overflows that are erupting and coming up through the pipes and then causing all this contamination of oysters. People got sick. It's all because of the failing SSOs. And this is why reporting this stuff, is really, really important. So the thing that I think, if you look at some of these visuals, I just wanted to point out that a lot of times raw sewage is gray. It has gray, it's gray in color. If you're out there and you see some of these, if there's a sewer overflow, look for that gray, or you see gray in the stream, especially, that's a really troubling sign. Fine toilet paper, like ground up, is a real indication. I guess or sometimes then when there's a lot of rain, there's more dilution and it's not as gray. It could be either black or it can be more brown, like the overflow that you see in some of the visuals here, right? It doesn't matter what it is or what it looks like. It's just that they really should not be happening. And if you see it, the main thing is we want you to safely, if you're comfortable, grabbing a sample, because that can really give us an indication of some of the problems, or how dangerous it might be, or what type of water quality impairment it might cause. So that's important. But again, safety first. We want to make sure, but just keep that in mind. Sometimes there's really distinct odors, so use your nose while you're out there. But a lot of times it's hard to smell sewage, depending if it's been diluted. So I guess that's all I'm saying is one size doesn't fit all. But if you see these type of manhole covers that are bubbling over, or water coming out or flowing out, or these gray discharges or black discharges, and you can safely grab a sample, hopefully using like a stick or something, then, please do so. And then we have the numbers on how to report these things. DC has upwards of 50 to 70 overflows per year, depending on which part of the system you're at. There's over 45 discharge points at which their CSOs discharge, and Rock Creek has a bunch of them, as you all know. Under the law, they're only supposed to happen about 4 to 6 times a year, or they're supposed to meet an 85% reduction. You don't need to know all that. The bottom line is, this is why DC is under a consent decree, because they've been breaking the law for so many years that they're required by EPA to fix this. It's up to you. If you see a combined sewer overflow, particularly if it hasn't rained in a while, these are dry weather discharges. We just discovered one of those last year, discharging into the Potomac River. And so, reporting those, one of the things that didn't happen is we didn't report it properly. It was sent to, so we want to make sure that you are getting the right numbers and right contact information for reporting these types of things. But all of these, as you know, are just major sources of bacteria, dangerous for water quality, can also cause algae blooms and pollution in our waterways. And but just make sure that when you're out there, if you're not comfortable grabbing the sample because you feel it's too dangerous, then don't. But just reporting this stuff is the most important thing, and good documentation, taking pictures and getting the proper address and information. Carl's going to go over a lot of that. I just wanted you to be aware, but And the one thing about broken sewage pipes I think is worth mentioning is that sometimes a broken pipe looks really terrible, but it may be the replaced pipe, and sometimes they'll just run another line next to it. And so what Carl has done when we believe that there's high sources of bacteria linked to a possible broken sewage pipe, doing this upstream sampling where we go upstream and then downstream is really, really important, because it gives us a good indication. Is this sewage pipe broken? Is this the source of bacteria that may be causing harm and things like that? So, and the other slide that I put in there, the one with Carl standing there grabbing a sample, I just put that in there, kind of throw a little curveball at you, because that turned out not to be sewage. It didn't really seem to be too big of a source of bacteria, other than probably some urban stormwater. But I had some concerns because this was right near a really derelict trailer park. And there was a lot of like, it looked bad. But again, the only way we could really tell was getting out there and sampling. And, we definitely got some bacteria hits, but it wasn't anything egregious. It wasn't raw sewage. It wasn't anything that, so that's why I think it's just always, you never know exactly what you're dealing with. But I think obviously if you see a manhole cover and it's gray and water's boiling out of it and there's toilet paper everywhere, you can pretty much assure yourself that is, shouldn't be happening, and you definitely should report it. And if you're comfortable, grab a sample. That'd be great. So obviously the top left picture is an oil spill. It's not rocket science. This stuff should not be in the waterways. The good thing is the Coast Guard has a national response center, and particularly in tidal waters, they're really great about responding. And so we've provided you like a hotline number that you can send it. Usually staff will be there taking your calls and ask you details, and we'll ask you for like an email. And they'll ask you like, hey, what's your name? What's your location? What organization are you working with? Can you give me the address, date and time of the incident, location, right? Do you have a GPS coordinate or a street address? All these things for all your reporting is extremely important, right? The one thing that they will probably ask you or may ask you is the source and the cause of the release, right? And I'll just give you an example. Like 2-3 years ago, I was working and I got a call from this angler, and he said, hey, this oil spill has been going on in 4 Mile Run since Friday, and this was Monday. And he's like, when we were out there Friday and it smelled so bad, like the fire department came and told everybody to get away. And I'm like, okay, so what happened? Well, it was right on the border of Arlington and Alexandria, right? So the Alexandria Fire Department responded, but they didn't go out of their jurisdiction and cross 4 Mile Run and go up and look for the source. So even though there's like the fire department, which has booms and the ability to respond to an oil spill to help the Coast Guard, particularly on inland waters, nobody tried to find the source. So the one thing I will say, whether it's construction activity, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, or, if you have the time and and you're out in your watershed and you see a source coming out of a pipe like an oil, if you think you can go upstream and find where it might be coming from, that's never a bad thing to do. It's actually very, very helpful. I actually, in this case, just got in my car and drove up, and I kept looking in the stream until I couldn't see it anymore. And then I backtracked and I found exactly where it was coming from. It literally took me 5 minutes to find the source, but it had been going on for 3 straight days, and nobody reported it to the Coast Guard. The only response was from the Alexandria Fire Department. Virginia DEQ didn't come out. So I say this just because I just wish that angler knew how to properly report this. It would have saved so much time. I ended up sending it to the Coast Guard, and they actually walked me through this whole incident list. So just keep that in mind, that you just reporting this can be a major difference in allowing this to go on for 5 extra days versus actually nipping it in the bud right away. So some of the other things, illicit discharges, right? Basically, every municipality is supposed to be looking at its storm drains and finding sources of pollution that should not be discharging to the storm drains. And believe me, there's thousands of them, right? And basically, an illicit discharge is defined as, any discharge to the MS4 system that is not composed entirely of stormwater, right? So you see some of these examples you'll see in the slides of people like pouring paint, right? I've gotten calls about paint, right? Like, why is this stream turning white? Well, I go down, I find the stream, I go upstream, I find a storm drain, I go up the street a couple blocks and I find somebody had been dumping paint, right? That's why tracking the stuff back upstream can be very, very helpful to the inspectors, because you're not just now reporting where you're seeing it, the stream, but you're actually going up and finding the exact source and then giving them an address, pictures, and detailed information so that they can follow up in a timely manner and not allowing this to continue, or it just goes away by the time someone like me can get there and it's no longer, there's no evidence, right? So it's just really important for people in their communities that if they see these things, to understand that these are all under various permitting systems. All of them shouldn't be happening. And it's really important that, so there's reporting mechanisms for illicit discharge. Every county government or like DC has its own illicit discharge detection system. They're required to have staff and a line, reporting mechanism. So we have that for Montgomery County for any volunteers that want to, if they feel like they find an illicit discharge or they see something, that they can report that, right? And I mentioned this, we had a dry weather discharge. This was to a combined sewer system, but just last year we had Clark Construction had routed sewage. Instead of routing it to the sewage treatment plant, they put it into the combined sewer, and they were doing all these dry weather discharges, right? People were swimming in raw sewage when there shouldn't even been any sewage coming out of the combined sewer systems. And because this woman had filed a report, I got involved, and because I knew her name was Kathy Summers, I turned it over to EPA, turned into a big investigation. They found out exactly who did it, but it was too late. There was no substantial fines or anything type of enforcement action taken because the woman who reported it didn't report it to the right place. And so this is why this is really, really important, right? Is getting this information to the right place, to the right agency in a timely manner. The other thing I want to talk about, if you see, I know that Rock Creek Conservancy had expressed interest in construction runoff. First and foremost, this is the #1 water pollution problem and the largest source of impairment to our nation's waters, according to EPA, sediment. The Chesapeake Bay is impaired for nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. So we're trying to clean up this entire bay because we have a lot of sediment runoff and obviously other nutrients that carry with it. Sediment will carry things like phosphorus particles that attach to the sediment and move into our waterways, which then stimulates algae blooms and all sorts of stuff. So basically, anytime it rains, these construction sites they have their own permitting as well, right? And the way it works is that, unlike the oil response hotline, which is a national hotline, this is like, there's EPA and then there's the state agencies we can report this to, like Maryland Department of Environment. But usually every construction site has a delegated authority, which is the local program, right? And so Montgomery County has its own erosion sediment control program, right? And that's a good thing. You have local people there on the ground that can get out and respond to this. But providing them good information again is really, really important, right? So under this permit for any type of construction site, it requires permits for any sites that are larger than 1 acre. Now that's out in more rural areas, like out in rural Montgomery County and other parts of the state. Often, like if you're in DC or some more urbanized areas, they will have usually just 1/4 acre lots fall under this permitting system, right? That they actually have this construction stormwater permit, okay? So none of that's really important to you. I think what's most important is just understanding that the two most important things I think everybody should look at, if you see those pictures right there, contractors are required to maintain their construction sites, right, under their permit. So if you see like a collapsed silt fence where mud is going over it, or you see mud in the street, or, you know, it just looks like the site is in disarray and there's a lot of mud being tracked in the street, report it. Just take pictures, document everything, and report it. No harm, no foul if you do it the right way, right? The main thing is, the thing I've learned over 20 years of doing this is inspectors hate wild goose chases. As a river keeper, I hate wild goose chases, and I've gone on plenty. So if you send me a picture with time and date, and there's a street address and there's a GPS coordinate, and it has, like, you know, just like some basic information, that's the type of stuff that an inspector needs to get out and observe these sites. And so just, you know, recognizing, like, you know, any type of disturbance to the site and runoff just is a major source of water pollution. If you see like mud, like in Rock Creek, you see a big thick torrent of mud, you know, that's an opportunity for you to like start going upstream and try to find where that is coming from and tracking it back to the site. That would help the inspector tremendously. It would actually probably resolve the issue in a much more timely manner. So that's an easy thing. And, you know, I used to do this whole program in North Carolina called Muddy Water Watch. The good thing is they have a Muddy Water Watch app, and they've agreed to that. If we want, we can you guys can download the app if you feel that this is a useful tool for you. And then we can just add in the contacts at Montgomery County and the state of Maryland for reporting erosion sediment control problems. And then you have this downloadable app, and it has a report built into it. And we can make that available to you if you're interested. But that's Muddy Water Watch. And you could just tell me if that's something you know, that you'd really like to see more of. And this green picture right here of the green stream, we don't know what that is, but I'm put it on there because I wanted to express why I think this program is really important. This was sent to our hotline, I don't know, probably about 6-8 months ago. And but it went to our hotline. It didn't work for some reason. I didn't get this. This woman, to her credit, kept trying to follow up with us. She saw it on a Friday. She finally got a hold of me Monday afternoon, said, "Hey, I've been trying to reach you. I sent this email with these pictures. I want to tell you where this is." And I ended up sending it on Tuesday morning to Alexandria, where this happened. I never heard anything back. But again, this delay in action was just, it could have been avoided if this person knew exactly how to send this in a timely manner. It would have expedited response. Take pictures, get the address, send it in, and just be done with it. You're doing your job, you're helping your stream and helping the Potomac River. So I'll leave it at that.
Great overall summary of the variety of different types of incidents that we're hopefully looking for. And Dean also teed up extraordinarily well the fact that with RRT deployments, we may not actually be doing collections. In certain cases, it may just be observations and documentation and then following up. So that's a real key concept to get right up front. We're not necessarily expanding to collect and test for chemicals and all sorts of other things. We're sticking pretty much with our standard water quality monitoring approach, as you'll see. As I go through the next set of slides, what I'd say is if anybody has any questions, please feel free to interrupt. But also I've got the chat window open. So if you've got any questions and you just want to type it into the chat window, I'll be keeping an eye on that. So that might be a little bit easier for folks to ask for clarification or if you've got any questions. So with that, we'll jump right into it. So a preparation for RRT, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the kit, the collection kit, and how that's going to be a little bit different than what you may be used to from the normal kit that we've got. I know this slide looks a little strange, but it's going to make sense as it builds. We're going to have, as we do this, we're going to have basically probably more collections. So in other words, for those of you who've gone out to sites in the past, you may collect one bacteria or maybe a duplicate, but you may go to a site and realize you have to do 2 or 3 sets of collections. When you do that, you may be using 4 or 6 different bacteria and or sediment bottles, turbidity bottles. So you're going to need a larger cooler. So one of the things we're going to be doing with the kit is actually procuring some larger coolers for people to use. Each kit is going to have probably at least 6 bacteria bottles and 6 turbidity bottles. Again, we want to have folks ready for whatever happens, because when you get on site, as you'll see from some of my later slides, you're going to have to sort of do some improvisation to kind of figure out what the collection strategy may be based on what you're seeing. So we want to make sure you're equipped with enough collection bottles if you're going to be doing the collection. Obviously, you're still going to need ice and a thermometer and pH strips like we've used in the past. In terms of PPE, you know, we always have provided gloves for folks to use. And most people have used them, but we've never really said it's mandatory that you absolutely have to use them at every step of the process. In this case, you really do. I mean, we know you've all been doing that with bacteria bottles, but we want you to wear gloves when you're interacting with the water or whatever you're collecting in this case, because when you're going out to one of these sites to do a collection, the probability is extraordinarily high that you're going to be dealing with some extremely contaminated water. This is a different set of probabilities than our normal water collection process. So we want to make sure you've got all the PPE you need, specifically gloves. If you're going to be wading in the water, you're definitely going to have to bring some boots and whatnot available. But you really have to pay more attention to your PPE situation when you're working RRT for us. One of the other things that you need to know is that now with the, you're not going to have necessarily a QAP, quality assurance program that's going to show you pictures and exact locations of what a collection site looks like. You'll be getting the tip information that we get through the reporting process, which will describe the site. Hopefully we'll have geo coordinates that we'll be able to share with the team. But that's something that you're really going to have to be able to use is given geo coordinates. You're going to have to put those into your phone and possibly play a little bit of not quite geocaching, but finding your way for wherever this tip leads us. We outlined the water quality monitoring manual and the quick start guide and the field collection data sheet, because you will be using similar information. We're going to have some more documentation in written form for the RRT collection process. We've got a few drafts of things together, so you will have that available when we need you to go out and do different types of collection. For the most part, you'll be using the water quality field and lab data sheet. However, and a big shout out goes to Joe McNeese for having developed a great Google survey tool that allows us to do it online. I'm not going to go in, this is not going to be a training session in that, but I do want to tell you that that tool is fantastic. It really integrates the ability to record local geo coordinates, the ability to take pictures, to identify the site, to record all the stuff and more that this paper data sheet normally does. So as we start to come into the spring season and we get things back up and running, we'll have a separate session on how to use that tool. But again, a big shout out to Jill McNeese for that. That's been extraordinarily helpful. Obviously, you're going to need labels to label the bottles when you do your collections. In this case, rather than going out with 2 or 4, you're going to have to go out with at least 12 labels and be ready for, again, a larger set of collections. And then the other normal tools, you know, clipboards and pens and Sharpies, trash bags, and some paper towels or sanitizing wipes just to help kind of keep things clean. You're definitely gonna have to bring a phone or a tablet or something with you, because you got to take pictures and you got to record your own geocoords. So even if we get coordinates sent to us through a tip, when you do a collection, you have to get precise geocoordinates from where you do that collection. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but there's an app through Jill's online Google survey tool that lets us do it. But also, if you just know how to use the Google Map dropped pin concept, you can pull the coordinates off of that and record it. Also, most people have used grabbers on their collections. You're definitely going to want to use one in this case. obviously, because you got to make sure you're getting out and getting into a sample, and it also will provide another level of safety for your collection. So, and also teammates and the RRT lead phone number, because it's highly likely you may have questions that you may need answered before you proceed. Okay, I'll go on to the next section, incoming incident reports, how that is going to happen. This is a little bit of a busy flow chart. I wouldn't worry about memorizing it. I'll just kind of walk you through it real quick. The first thing I'd point out, if you look in the upper right-hand corner here, you can see we've developed a mail group, rrt@prknetwork.org. That goes to a number of us responsible who have different responsibilities for RRT for the Riverkeeper, and anything that comes in. If I were you taking this training, I'd say, if I see something, who's the first? How do I alert the organization? That's how you alert the organization. And email any tips that you've got to that, or if anyone gives you information, you can give them that email to send it to us. So that kind of comes in. As Dean mentioned, we'll also get calls or emails or other things through social media. There's a variety of ways, but we're trying to have that all come in through a funnel if you will, into one front door to this process. So when that comes in, that's going to alert Dean, and in this case, the RRT lead, myself, will be alerted to what's going on. That tip is going to be put into a database, and this is going to hopefully, in the long run, alleviate the concern that Dean had about something comes in, but either no one took action, or it wasn't documented, or it fell through the cracks somehow. We're going to have just a centralized spreadsheet that's going to track all of the incidences that are reported, regardless of whether we took action on them or not. We may see things that are not worthy of us, going out on because they don't fit our jurisdiction, or they're not significant enough, or maybe it wasn't credible enough, or there was just no resources for us to be able to go out and do it. But over time, we may see patterns develop in that information. So it's going to be important just to kind of track the incidents that are reported to us, and also to follow up to people who've reported that. They kind of want to know, did anything happen on it or not? If they don't hear anything back from us, they're going to think that we haven't been effective on it. So with that, between Dean and myself and others, we'll kind of quickly triage it and try and figure out, is it a sewerage problem? Is it a construction runoff problem? Is it an oil spill, chemical? It could be a garbage dump people might have dumped a couple of tons of trash in a stream bed area, or is it unknown? So in that case, on some of these that we're not necessarily going to collect on, but we still may go out and observe, we're going to have folks reach out and contact the appropriate point of contacts immediately, so action can be taken, again, as Dean had mentioned earlier. When we sort of figure out what it is we're going to do, then we'll prepare and launch if we're going to do an observation or a collection, we'll then launch the RRT team, and if not, we'll close out the case and inform whoever reported it to us about what had happened and why. All right. So that's how an incident comes in. Then kind of what happens at sort of a high level. Well, conceptually, the RRT lead, myself, I'll alert the appropriate team. So depending on where it is, Montgomery County or in DC or in Fairfax, our goal, and we're not there yet, our goal is to have a network of folks who are not just trained in water quality monitoring, but also trained in RRT processes and procedures, and hopefully eventually have a lead or two in each county that we can then alert and turn it over to them to then take on the responsibility of doing the collection. The lead will talk with whoever is going to be taking the lead and going out and doing the collection to discuss the timing of deployment and whether a collection or an observation effort is worthwhile. The other thing that happens at this first step is that the lab is alerted. So Lisa Wu and company are immediately brought in because they're going to have to be getting ready to fire up the lab and process any material that gets collected. And so we want to make sure we synchronize all that timing so we don't inconvenience people, because sometimes we will have to drive a significant distance to to get to the lab or get to a collection site. And so that the tip information we get will be provided to anyone who's going out in the field to do that. With that, then I'll make sure that Lisa and the team are scheduled to be able to process any collection that's done within 24 hours. And then we'll make sure that information is gotten back to whoever did the collection, and also to Dean, so he's aware of what's going on. And then at that point, we're going to coordinate based on whatever results we see or whatever gets documented from the field collection, again, pictures or other data, about how to immediately get in touch with the right people in that jurisdiction, whether it be county health department or WISC or somebody else, to make sure they're alerted and they've got data to back it up. Once that's set, then our goal is to consider doing a new collection or observation 30 days afterwards to see if there's any type of follow-up or any impact or significant change that's occurred at that site. I just want to highlight safety and rules of the road at this point as well. With normal water quality monitoring, we let people go out on their own because they know the location. Conditions are usually quite well understood. In this case, the conditions are almost never going to be well understood at the start. So we're implementing a buddy system here. So you have to have at least 2 people that go and do a collection. We don't want one person trying to do this all by themselves. It makes it a lot easier. These collections are going to be a bit more complex. There's going to be more samples that are collected. And also, as we use the new data, online data collection tool that Jill created, it's a lot easier to have one person getting their hands dirty and doing the collection, and a second person working the iPad or the iPhone and taking the pictures and doing the geocodes. It's a nice segmentation of labor of what needs to go on. So buddy system is really important. As we've said, with our normal water quality monitoring, safety first always. So never, if you feel that a situation is just too difficult to get to or to collect, don't do it. Don't do it. Just take pictures or observe, but do not put yourself or your teammate in jeopardy. That is first and foremost. Remain on public access. We're trying to do some really great stuff here, but that doesn't give us license to trample over private property and go places where we're not supposed to be. That's just not allowed. So make sure you do some reconnaissance ahead of time to know where you're going. That's going to be discussed with me, the lead, in terms of preparing to go out there. And even when you're driving and parking at a location, make sure you're parking in a legal place to park, because that's, that can get you fouled up too. So make sure you're doing all that stuff on the up and up. Lastly, no freelancing, and that just means we don't want people going off on their own and doing collections without the rest of the team knowing what's going on. And because again, there's resources that need to be activated and put in play here. We're just not at that point. All right, I've gone to the next slide. Again, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'm assuming that everybody is following this. Okay, so a quick review of the collection and drop-off procedures. Again, for those of you who've taken the training, you'll see some very familiar steps here, but again, they've been augmented somewhat. Again, 2 volunteers are going to go to the site based on the information that they're given. But before you do that, you need to familiarize yourself with the location with Google Maps or Google Earth. So make sure you know it's in a stream, that's in a watershed somewhere, know where the roads are, know where you can park, and get a sense if there's any trails or hiking paths nearby. Those type of things will make it a little bit easier for you. When you get on site, again, like we normally do, you start your observation right away, kind of get a sense of what's going on the ground, note any signs of the spills, smells, any other telltale signs of a spill or issues at hand, and begin recording that stuff on the data sheet or on the online tool immediately. You also need to establish a title for the site, because as you've gone out on normal collections, each site has its own name and code. Well, now you basically have to create a title for the site that you go to. And I'll give you an example of this in a following slide. And you're going to have to come up with a numbering code of where you collect. It's very easy. It's, just basically do it 1, 2, 3 in terms of your locations, but you're gonna have to establish that title yourself. Also, immediately begin documenting with images of what you see, of anything that's relevant. And then we want lat longs of where you actually do collections, as I had mentioned earlier. So again, you can do that using Google Maps, Dropin, or any other app. But they have to be as precise as you can get. So we can recreate collections if we need to go out there later. After doing those first few steps, sorry about that, you're going to have to make a decision whether you're actually going to collect or not. It may have been decided that the goal was to try and collect while you're there, but you may realize that it's not safe or not accessible, or there may just be some other issues. If you've got questions, you can call me or Dean, and we can kind of help sort things out. Again, we want to make sure that people are comfortable in what they're doing. The other thing that the team on site is going to need to decide is what's the collection strategy. And I'll walk through again some scenarios I've got that we've done that kind of do this. But you can imagine if you see where the sewage is coming out or whatever it is, you may be able to sample right at the source. And that would be great if you could do that. The source might not be definable or locatable or accessible. So you may have to do another collection, which goes, as Dean mentioned, above the stream and then below stream where you are. So we can kind of do a delta. And we've come up with a name for that strategy called 2 up and 2 back. And what that means is we're going to collect 2 samples above and 2 samples below. So anytime you do a collection, the goal here may be to do a duplicate, if you will, at every collection. And that way we can be doubly sure about our readings that we get. And also there's a new technique that Lisa and the team have developed in the lab that allows dilution of samples, which allows us to actually detect and measure and put a number on higher levels of bacteria content in a sample. That's been very powerful. And again, I'll show you an example of that in just a second. So once you've done step 5, you're gonna move on to making sure you get your PPE in place, gloves specifically, masks. That's again, if CDC and DC and others say we need to go back to masks when we're with people, we're gonna need to do that. So again, follow all the CDC recommendations. And boots, obviously use common sense. If you got to wade into water, you don't want to just use your own normal regular boots. You may need to get some good rubber safety boots. So we can follow up with you on that. The rest of these steps should look pretty similar. You're going to collect air and water and pH samples. You're going to collect 2 bacteria samples at each location, label them, put them on ice. Same thing with turbidity. You can do any other collections if you need to move on to an additional site. But also you'll see on step 10, I talk about doing a hand-drawn map. I should say hand-drawn map. Because as you collect at a site, it might get a little bit complicated, and you've got to be able to document where you took each of the readings and why you did it at those locations. And then to wrap it up, clean up, sanitize, review your documentation, make sure you've recorded everything that you need to do, and then get the samples down to the CDOG within 5 hours. Again, that's our standard procedure of collection to the lab. Okay. So I'll give you 2 quick examples. We had gotten working with the Little Falls Watershed, a tip that near the Somerset area, right near the DC and Montgomery County border, that there had been a sewage overflow, and it had taken a while for WISIC to come down and clean it up. And also there had been some previous collections that had been done there, some of you may know. So we went in, and a team of us met at Vinton Park. We had the information from the Little Falls Watershed Alliance about what was going on. So we basically took a walk up this path, and the overflow area we were told was about here. Well, when we had gotten up the path, we could see across the stream where the sewer manhole was. It was surrounded, as you can see on this picture on the right here. There was caution tape everywhere. There was hydrated lime spread throughout the area around the sewer manhole cover. And So we realized, well, we weren't going to be able to actually collect right in that area because it was off limits. So we walked further upstream till we knew we were well above where that spill had happened. And that's where we decided to do our first collection. We then went back downstream, again, taking GPS coordinates and pictures the whole way. We went downstream and did a second collection below the overflow area. So again, that was a good example of a 2 up and 2 back example. Interesting findings. And once again, follow the science, not always what you think it's going to be. The collection site below was actually cleaner than the collection site above. We had expected to find, obviously, possibly high bacteria contents down at collection site 2, but the cleanup had apparently gone extremely well, and there hadn't been any rain in quite some time. So no sewage was coming in there. What we did notice was the pH level jumped a full point from site 1 down to site 2. So we thought that might have been the effect of the hydrated lime that raises pH to help disinfect the area, and actually might be disinfecting part of the stream. So maybe it actually makes sense that it was slightly lower contamination at collection site 2. Another collection we had done was at the Willett Branch, and this is near Beth. Goodness gracious! Again, also in the same area, the Little Falls Watershed near Bethesda. And here's a case where they were already doing some collections, WB1, WB2, and WB3 in conjunction with ARC over the summer. Well, it turns out this area has seemed to always be maxing out on most probable number of bacteria count throughout most of the summer, even when it wasn't raining. So clearly there's some significant contamination going on. The stream flow is north to south. And so what we did was since WB2 was the highest upstream that they had measured in the past, we decided to go upriver, go further up to see if we could determine what the cause of the contamination. And when you got further up, the stream actually splits into 2. The main part that comes down, we did a sample, we called that WBA. And then there was a little tributary coming in. So we sampled that tributary above the stream where it was coming in. We called that WBB. We then went downstream and measured WB1 where they had collected before. We did that for consistency so we could correlate it with previous data. And then even further downstream with WB3. So here's a case where we collected at 4 different locations, and it was a little bit more complicated than we thought it was going to be to do, but we were really happy that we did what we did, because if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, for those of you who are fans of the E. coli count data, as you know, to pass, you've got to, for swimming perspective at least, you've got to be at 235 mpns or lower. Well, WBA was over 12,000, over 12,000. We've never seen it. I've never seen anything that high myself. I'm sure it exists, but that was gargantuan. WBB, the small pipe that was coming in, was 13 times below that. So it wasn't the little pipe that was coming in from the side that was contaminating the stream. This data right here told us that the significant contamination was coming in from the mainstream further up at extraordinarily high levels. As you go down to WB1 and WB3, you can see that it's still extremely high, but it is dropping. And that's probably because other water is coming into the stream, but it also ruled out any other contamination from some other sewer pipes that happen to be near B1 and B2. So again, there was an example of how, you know, once you get on site, you have to kind of figure out what the right collection strategy might be. And once again, if you've got questions or ideas, this is something that we can talk about on the phone if you go to do a collection. So again, just wanted to give you those 2 scenarios as examples. Again, these are some of the first ones we've been doing, so we're still new at this ourselves. Okay, this is the field data collection sheet. Should look very familiar to you who've done the training and done some collections. It's all still exactly the same. That information that gets collected. Of course, things like tidal stages, you know, might not be relevant for where we're necessarily collecting, but still you fill this out the same way. Rainfall is extremely important. And again, we normally use what the rainfall at National Airport as the rainfall of record for that. And here's just an example of the data sheet filled in. Please, I apologize for my horrible handwriting here, but it's pretty straightforward. And of course, you still have to fill out a chain of custody form, which is on the back side. This is something that we're working with Jill as well to figure out how we can do this electronically and use electronic signatures. And then once you get it, we've got to bring the samples down to the lab at National Harbor. There may be a way, you know, between the team, since you're doing a buddy system, not both of you don't have to come down to the lab. You can just figure out who's got to do the drive, or if there's a way to hand it off to someone else to bring it down, you know, we can definitely work with you on that. But the goal is to get the sample to the lab within 5 hours. Most of you may be familiar with the lab, but again, it's our full up tier 3 lab on a boat at National Harbor. The Sea Dog was donated to us by retired Navy Admiral J. Paul Reason and his wife. It's been a fantastic, tool in our tool belt for doing water quality monitoring in the Washington area. So if you haven't had a chance to get down there and see it, please take advantage of the opportunity to do it. It's currently out of the water right now, getting some work done on it, but it will be back in and operational in the springtime. To get down to the lab and handoff procedures, again, this is identical to what we do with normal water quality monitoring testing. Drive on down to National Harbor. You park at the parking lot that is closest to the water. If you just keep it on your right the whole way, it's very easy to see and to find. You park there, get yourself a parking ticket, and then walk on down through the front of the pier, go past the Awakening statue and out onto the docks. And we are about halfway out on your way to the Capitol Wheel. We will give you the detail of how to get through the gate and the gate entry code when we need to do that, but you just kind of bring it down there. And then when you come out to the boat, we're not sure what slip it's going to be in the springtime, but we'll make sure you know where it is. And, come up onto the boat, knock on the door, and the lab will have pre-engineered the drop-off time. So either Kent or Lisa or myself or someone will be there to get the sample from you. And in this case, you're gonna have to spend a little bit more time going over what was done, right? Because it's not just a well-defined site that we've done before. When you hand over the paperwork, it's also probably good for you to have your little hand-drawn map so you can show the context of where you did the collections and where each of the bottles was collected from. And then working with Lisa, she'll need to work with you to decide what samples are going to be done at full strength and what samples are going to be done with dilution. And that'll be, that'll kind of take some working out, but Lisa can walk you through that process. And then similar to what we've done in the past, you're going to have to get your kit restocked because we want to make sure all of our RT folks who are going to be doing some active collections have a kit with them available, ready to go. So at least and the team can take care of that. All right, so formal reporting and revisit. Once we get that data in terms of what happens with your sample, or if it's just an observation, we're going to need you to fill out a county-specific report template. These are in draft right now, but this is a template that's got the contact information that you're going to use to reach out to the right authorities to report what you've collected and what you've seen. You'll go over that with me, the RRT lead, and then you're going to submit that to whoever the right entity is per the template instructions. And then again, we're going to want to do a follow-up 30 days later, or we're going to assess if we need to do a follow-up 30 days later to see if the situation's been resolved and or if we need to do a resampling. This information we'll make available to you. Dean brought up a great idea of us putting it on a laminated card that'll be, maybe attached to the RRT kit that you've got. We want you to know that this is, as Dean mentioned, this is like the punchline. You got to know who to report this information to. So it can be, the information can be acted upon. So we've got data here on how to report illegal dumping, both to the county and to the Department of Environmental Protection, how to report water sewage pollution, how to report sediment control pollution, and then how to report chemical spills. And again, these are focused on Montgomery County specifically. Some of these are phone calls, some of these are reporting them online through links, and we've provided those links here. Also, Dean mentioned sometimes, not knowing what it is, may see a fish kill or some other issue. So there's specific phone numbers that can be reported to as well. So you want to make sure you had that data. And also, again, since Montgomery County areas are right on the DC border, there may be cases where you need to reach out to DC Water and their hotline, and they can be very responsive. Okay, well, that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's a lot here. If you've taken the training and done monitoring before, a lot of this should look familiar, but hopefully you see some of the changes and adaptations we've needed to make for this more asynchronous approach to water quality monitoring collection. We don't expect you after just this presentation to then be able to go out and do this yourself. So one of the things that we're going to schedule, and I'll let Dean and Serena and Megan, address this in a little bit, is following up with an on-site hands-on training session sometime, either in the next few weeks or next few months, depending on people's availability. So please keep that in mind. Look for that to be scheduled. And again, keep in mind, we're doing all of this because we want the water to be clean for people to drink and recreate in. That's the whole point to this. And anything we can do to solve some of these again, asynchronous problems that occur, that can be extraordinarily helpful to the mission of the Potomac Riverkeeper. So with that, Dean, I'll turn it back over to you, and we'll open it up to any questions. Okay, Jill has asked, hand-drawn map sounds like a great idea. Can you share an example? I don't have one handy, but actually those two scenarios I walked you through, those I created from my hand-drawn map. So I had actually looked at Google Maps ahead of time, zoomed in really close on the location, kind of flickered back and forth between imagery and regular map mode to kind of understand, where the roads and parking and tree cover and trails were. And then I actually kind of drew it out on a piece of paper ahead of time and had it on my clipboard. And then that was a good tool to kind of then start, drawing cartoons with it. And again, we're asking folks to do that in the field. We don't expect it to be draftsperson quality stuff. Just make it something that you can articulate with Lisa when you get down to the lab, because again, that's when it has actually become very important, because they start documenting it with the rest of the information. And we've created a separate binder down at the Sea Dog that has all of our collection data and reports in it from RRT. And so we put that hand-drawn map right in there as well. So it's a good piece of documentation. So again, feel free to draw it up as long as you can walk someone else through it. It doesn't necessarily have to be standalone. It doesn't have to stand alone by itself to explain. It doesn't have to have a scale on it or anything like that. It just has to be a good overall schematic to characterize it.
And since we don't have really any questions, just 2 points I really want to make. One is, if it wasn't clear enough, just that, we want people to collect these samples from public right-of-ways, just like we do for our water quality monitoring. Just, you're not going on a private property, you're actually doing it from a street, roadway, or a park that has public right-of-way. So we're not trespassing on private property. And I just wanted to emphasize that. And then 2 is, Carl mentioned the buddy system for sampling and reporting. I think it's important just to say that, the other incident reporting, like construction runoff, oil discharges, all that stuff, you don't necessarily need to have a buddy system for that. You know, again, if you're out walking your dog, you see a construction site that's has problems, you don't need to go flag rapid response and, you know, try to get somebody out there. Just take those pictures, follow the, you know, the training protocols about what is needed, right? You know, name, address, location, GPS coordinate, time, and get some of that in, and feel free to take some video too. You might not be able to submit the video, but that may be useful in a lot of ways down the road in terms of follow-up, because as Carl emphasized, some of these issues are going to be one-offs. Like, you're going to report this, the inspector's going to go out and they're going to make the contractor fix it, and it's done. Some of these things turn into a very long investigation period. So, for example, some of the pictures I showed in my slides further back, one of them, which, you know, we found when I first started here, you know, like 5-6 years ago, and we're still dealing with that problem. That's where the volunteers, you know, are no longer involved. We're working with lawyers and all the you know, staff and, you know, whoever we're dealing with. So I just want to emphasize that we're here to do the proper follow-up, but what we're trying to get out of this is just people being trained and properly reporting this, so that the inspectors, when they get this information, they know that it's coming from quality trained volunteers, that they're not frustrated and pulling their hair out and go, you know, those riverkeeper volunteers, God, they don't send me the right information. They don't send pictures. They don't give me the information I need. We're trying to make sure that we're giving the inspectors the right information in a timely manner so that they can respond to these incidents and fix these problems, so they're not going on for days or weeks at a time, but they're being, you know, hopefully remedied in a fairly short period of time. So the one thing I will tell you is that over and over again, I've been doing this for 20 years, every state, every agency, whether it's federal, state, local, they always say, just tell us what's going on. Just let us know. Like, you know, but again, we want to send them credible information so we can expedite the process and make sure that there's good response in a timely manner. And that's what we're trying to do. So I do appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.